Hey everybody, welcome to Connect in Cannabis. I am brought to you by Wrazel. I, of course, am your host, Brian Holler. Thank you so much for being here today. Today we have Greg Gerosky, CEO of Falkor Digital. He'll be joining us to talk about the importance of design and in your investment decks and your presentations and some marketing and branding advice as well. So we're very much looking forward to that. But first I've got to talk to you about Apricot Analytics. Apricot Analytics is a full-service product quality lab for cannabis testing and CBD hemp testing. They have over a decade of analytical lab experience and have been working with cannabis products since 2005. Apricot Analytics understands the needs of cannabis and hemp producers because they were producers themselves. They know the challenges, the frustrations, and dreams of cultivators and manufacturers. They get it because they've been there and they're here to help. Apricot Analytics tests your products for the good stuff like THC and CBD concentrations and helps you identify any bad stuff like pesticides, mold, bacteria, and heavy metals. For more information, go to apricotanalytics.com, or to learn more about their current investment opportunity, please go to the Wrazel investment marketplace at wrazel.com. Now let me bring in our guest, Greg Gerosky. Greg, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Brian. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, sir. Always good to speak with you. Looking sharp with your multi-camera angles and your presentation.
Yeah, trying to get in the modern day. See?
There you go. Looking really sharp, looking really good. I'm looking forward to talking to you about something that you and I, of course, have talked about many, many times when we're corresponding about clients for Wrazel or even sometimes your own. Presenting and the importance of design. Let's start from the beginning. What inspired you to create Falkor Digital?
I came from a background of building pitches myself. I came from television and pitching branded partnerships and things like that always required pitch materials.
Sure.
And, when I was working at these companies, I always found that the types of resources that were available to me were typically minimal. And I would start looking for options, and it would be, finding a freelancer or finding a design agency. And I never found that company that kind of could do more to enable me and my teams to do better. So I started Falkor Digital as kind of a way to enable my customers to create better pitches for themselves, whether we're helping them create them and we're doing most of the work, or we're providing templates, or we're working with a client to help build out its own solution in-house. So it's more of a comprehensive thing that, I really wanted something that wasn't just a freelancer and wasn't an agency. It's something that would enable people to do better pitches.
Yes. Also, I would guess that allows for you to kind of have a more personalized approach with your clients, right?
Yeah.
I think people are really familiar with the term design agency, right? Yep. But I think you guys refer to yourself as a design consultancy.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you kind of explain or elaborate?
Yeah, so when you go to an agency is typically more of a services-driven company. You're going to come to them with what your needs are, and they're going to help service it with the final product. So if you go to a design agency, you might be getting a logo, you might be getting a website. They're handing over the product. Now, of course, there's a back and forth relationship. You get to know each other, you get to know your agency really well. But once the job is done, it's kind of done, and you're not engaging them again until you have another job you need done. Conversely, if you're working just with a freelancer, you go to get a freelancer to do your pitch deck. That person really knows design, but they don't necessarily know the language, the visual language behind what makes a good pitch, right? So we fit in kind of a gap where none of them really solve the problems that I faced when I was building pitches, or that I find that a lot of my clients face, which is assistance in creating a better message. Now, most of our customers know what their product is, or they know what their pitch is, but a lot of times they need help reframing it for an audience that doesn't. So when you're pitching something to an audience that doesn't know your message. And, with a consultancy, we bring that extra layer of helping you to define that message in a way that's more digestible. If, like I said earlier, if you're trying to do this in-house, or you're on your own, you don't have a big budget, or you have a budget, but you don't have a budget for all these specialty people like illustrators to do custom drawings, or people to do all of this more like intensive custom
copywriters and
copy editors. Exactly. So as a consultancy, we bring a lot more of those very specialized resources to the table, and we consult our clients on how to make better pitches and how to create a better message.
Which, of course, makes a lot of sense when it comes to the cannabis community specifically, because I can't think of a group of people and investments where, that's of paramount importance, in terms of just being able to really explain things in a very thorough, efficient manner. Because, a lot of new investors or new people are coming into the cannabis space, and they have a lot of kind of maybe misguided, ideas about what it's like, which actually means that, if I'm a cannabis company, I need to probably put even more attention and effort and work with a company that can be consultative in that way.
Yeah, and a lot of the terms we use for our clients are like retention, recall of your message. When an investor's looking at your deck, they're looking at 50 others in a day, or their team is vetting decks very quickly. So only the top 5 or 6 even get to the people who actually make the decision. So It's really important that your message have retention, recall. When they read it, they're going to remember, because they're only going to spend 5-10 minutes breezing through your deck. They'll spend more time once they're interested, and they'll dive into it when they're interested. But you only have that initial breeze through to capture their attention, not lose them in your messaging. And we all love our businesses. I mean, I get caught up in the same thing where, when I'm trying to explain my business to somebody, I get so caught up in the weeds of, because I'm passionate about it, just like most any entrepreneur is. But, sometimes it takes that third person, that extra perspective to sort of say, look, if I'm sitting in the other seat and I only have a few minutes to digest this, maybe we need to trim the fat, get this down to something where they're going to remember it. They're going to recall it. So later on, when they're going throughout their day, they're going to remember that image that connected with that text that you had. Or they're going to, the brain is a funny thing. The way that you remember things and you recall things, it's not typically just text. It's you're attaching ideas to imagery. And that's where we are, as a consultancy, we really focus. We help our clients, use imagery to tell a narrative that isn't just your words on paper.
Right. And, obviously with Wrazel, we experience a lot of the same thing, because we're, working with clients to get them presentable and, buttoned up correctly from all sorts of angles, and one of them being investment decks. And that's, of course, why Greg and us and Falkor, know each other well. But ultimately, it's so important that you give investors, a good snapshot, right? It reminds me a little bit of, when you apply for jobs, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you only need this much material to apply for jobs compared to an investment, it's going to be all sorts of things, but it's the same kind of thing. You need those people, those hiring managers, or those programs that are looking at those initially, to have the right language, the right kind of combination, the right design that's going to pop out so that employer goes, hey, that's interesting. It's the same kind of thing. It's just on a grander scale, obviously, and there's more parts for you to button up, but the same principle applies.
And it's a first impression, right? I mean, correct. It's like until they meet you, all they have is a resume. So all they can see is the design of your resume, if it's well thought out, if it's, if they're getting the facts they need out of it quickly, because all of those people are making assumptions all the time on what is presented to them. So if what's presented to them isn't really your story, like if you're using a PowerPoint template that was made 15 years ago or 10 years ago, like that does that represent your company? And of course not.
Can we pause for a second and please say to everybody out there, if you are using a PowerPoint deck that is older than maybe 6 months, a year old, you need to put that over here or in some garbage.
And we'll talk about it in some of the next steps here on some things you can do on your own
to improve. Exactly right. In fact, what a great segue, Greg. Let's just go ahead and roll with it.
Absolutely.
So Greg has graciously agreed to kind of share some tips and some different things about how to kind of move forward in constructing a good presentation. So let's take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we have here is actually a deck that I give a lot of my clients. It's a QuickStart guide, and it's something that we happily make available to anybody for free. This version of it is a live version, which we'll get into. There is a difference between your live pitch deck and the deck that you might leave behind. So, a lot of people think, it's one deck. Why don't I need anything else? We'll get into that. So out of the gate, here we are, presentation design, a quick guide to the basics. So we already kind of went through a little bit of the background, but I'll just kind of elaborate a little bit. I come from a television background. pitching television, so pitching, ideas, concepts, as well as branded entertainment. I spent a lot of time pitching branded entertainment to agencies and brands to help them help my clients figure out how to present their ideas and sell, large packages. So what we're going to cover in this really quickly, we're going to cover the process of creating a pitch deck. There is a bit of thinking that helps if you can go through some of that thinking in advance. It'll help your process along much better. We'll go through live materials like we just talked about, how to get assets and organize your assets, and how to use fonts. Oddly enough, sometimes fonts can make all the difference in the world, and the wrong font can sink you. We'll go through color palettes, using space effectively and proximity and alignment. So we'll go through all of these concepts. So starting out, what are we talking about here? A bad system will beat a good person every time. So just like anything, if you don't think through your materials and have a plan, no matter how good you are at what you're doing, it's very easy to completely get lost and have a bad set of materials if your system isn't sound, right? So what are we talking about? First of all, set goals for yourself. Set goals for what you want for your presentation to accomplish, and even bullet point them out for yourself very broadly. Start with the real broad strokes. There's plenty of resources out there that can tell you how to develop a pitch deck for investors in the way that they want to see it. So you should be looking for those. And on that point, get inspired. Find pitch decks that inspire you. Now, one cautionary tale of that, I don't know how many of you have seen this out there, but they're constantly kind of throwing around, and Brian, you must have seen these at some point too, the original pitch deck for Uber, or the original pitch deck for some of these big companies. The thing to remember,
find them right now.
It's crazy, right? And it's great to see them. But what people need to remember is that was like the first pitch deck that those teams created. A lot of times they're poorly designed, but their messaging all follows the same structure. The way that they bring out each of their topics and the way they cover them. But from a design point, those decks kept evolving and they kept going. So get out and get inspired, find design that you love, and try to mimic it. It's the best way to get great design. Storyboarding. So storyboarding is really helpful because you're essentially laying out your slides without putting anything on it except for the key goals, right? So one of your slides might be, what's the core problem in the marketplace, or the gap in the marketplace? Right. What's the problem? What's my solution? And start storyboarding out. And you don't even need to do it in slides. You could do it in a Word document, but you're bulleting out what you want to cover very broadly, and then start to drill down and insert your business into that format. Lastly, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just saying, I've seen people do it different ways, like you were just saying, Greg, in terms of, some people like to feel like they're being more efficient by kind of putting the kind of bullet points on the slide that they end up basically evolving into that. Yeah. But you can also do it any countless amount of ways. The point is to prepare something instead of just going, okay, I'm going to, first page is going to be this first slide. So let's go,
Yeah. The worst thing you do is just open up a PowerPoint and just start building, right? Precisely. Because you don't know where you're going. Right. You find that you want to make pivots, but when you just start right out of the gate with your final materials, some people can do that. I do that now that I've done it enough. Sure. But typically it's doing it with someone else's information. You're dealing with the information at this early stage. Don't get caught up in design early. Right. Get caught up in your message. Mm-hmm. And then finally, the right tools. I know PowerPoint has been the go-to for forever. But as a designer and as an owner of a design company, I would say it's the last tool I ever want to use. Keynote is fantastic because it's much more of a designer's tool. It's much simpler. Things aren't hidden. It's much more exact. And then if you can throw, Photoshop in the mix, if you can throw, understanding how to cut things out in Photoshop, do a couple tutorials on YouTube, learn Photoshop. Your design's going to go so much further because of it. But if all you have access to is PowerPoint, that's fine. You use the tools that you have available to you. But I just want to throw it out there. Typically, a professional designer will, if they have to deliver in PowerPoint, they're doing everything they can in other applications, and then bringing you a final PowerPoint, but they typically don't start there. Next here, what I like to typically do for myself, and this is a checklist I just follow whenever I design a deck or any of my designers design a deck, is we kind of build a simple checklist of things. And I just kind of do these instinctually now. So it was interesting putting them on paper. But, you know, simple things like setting your delivery deadline, even if you don't have one, even if you're a new business, you don't have a time you need to be to market, set a deadline. You'd be, you know, a lot of people aren't surprised by the fact that when you have a deadline and you have to put pressure on yourself, you tend to do better work. Now, does that mean you put something crappy out because you only had 2 days? No, but give yourself a realistic deadline and back into it. Set some scheduled, you know, tent poles. Have a rough cut date. Have a date where you're going to share it with a colleague or a friend and get their feedback, whether it's a partner or even just, you know, a family member you trust. Like, put those in a calendar so you keep yourself motivated and driven to finish your deck. Mood boards are just getting that inspiration. I go online all the time and I grab images that I think I like for this. So if I read a deck and I feel a brand coming out of it, I will look for images that connect. Rough storyboarding we talked about, rough layout of slide by slide copy, you know, choosing a color palette. I like to do that pretty early on. If a brand, you know, like just even like this deck, you know, the color palette is light gray and yellow, right? So that's just a simple color palette you can choose early on, and it makes your life so much easier as you're going through your deck already having these things. Same thing with a font. Already knowing your font that you like, knowing that how you want to use it. Then when you start designing, you've already got everything set up. High-res images. I go through, before I even design anything, I go through and I find 100 images and I put them all in organized folders so that when I'm designing, I don't have to keep going to Google, or I don't have to keep going to my stock footage site to find. I can just create. I can go right in and say, this slide really needs somebody on the right side, you know, looking at my title. And I look at, I already got that. Drop it in, right? So same thing with icon packs, anything else. You want to do as much of this in advance as you can.
Very good. So really it's a matter of just being prepared.
Yeah, just have a plan going in and
go back and add it to the checklist. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Now, live materials. So live materials are different. They are not the same set of materials. So think about it. If I had a slide that had a paragraph or 2 paragraphs on it, and I'm talking to you right now, are you able to fight the urge to read the text that's on the screen? Like even right now, there's text on the screen. You want to read it. Your brain is that part of your brain. It needs to be, you know, sort of activated. It needs to be compensated for what's in front of it, right? So this is the way I like to look at it. If you look in the bottom left, delivered materials, when you're, you know, emailing a deck that has lots of text, at that point, the person on the other end, their detail absorption level is high, right? Because you've got a lot of detail on there, but they've got the time, they've got the energy to read through it, okay? Impact and memorability is moderate because it just depends on the situation and what's going on and how much they're willing to absorb it. But here's where it gets different. Your share of their attention is very low. When you're, especially in COVID world, like we're not all just hyper focused on any one thing.
Right.
Oh, did we lose the presentation here?
Maybe.
Sorry about that. There we go.
No, you're good.
So people have too many distractions, right? When you send an email, they're distracted. They have too many things that they could be paying attention to, their phone, 15 other things, right? Now, in a live presentation, this entire model is inverted. Okay, people's ability in a live pitch to absorb detail is very low, right? Because they can't go back and reread it. Once you moved on, you've moved on. If they weren't paying attention, they miss it, right? So their ability to absorb details is low. So don't give them too many details in a live pitch. Impact and memorability still is about the same. It's just how you're delivering. And, you know, that's where the design kicks in. And if it's a good design and if it's a good story.
I would even say that in even in your non-live materials, you know, you're going to watch out for how much copy you're putting in those decks.
Absolutely.
And all those materials, because if I'm looking at 50 of these a day and I just look on the surface and see 26 paragraphs,
exactly.
I'm not interested.
And frankly, when a live presentation, what's great about a live presentation is you have all of their undivided attention. They're either in a room with you or they're on a Zoom call and you're looking at them, or you're in a room full of people and they can't get up and walk away or answer their phone. So your share of their attention is very high, right? So don't blow it by expecting them to absorb too much detail or distract them with copy on a slide.
Yeah, don't sound like the Peanuts teacher, you know? Because if all of a sudden they're interested, and then it turns into want, you've lost it. You're done.
Exactly. All right, so next up, as part of live pitch materials, just a couple of tips. Use large fonts. How appreciative are you right now that you can read what's on the screen? If I had it in tiny print, you'd be leaning forward and trying to squint to figure out what it is. It's all about, like it says here, clarity, focus, simplicity. The pacing all comes with the number of slides, with the type of images that you provide, and the cadence of your voice. If you get excited, if you're monotone and you're quiet, right? So keep with heavy contrast, like you see here, white on dark colors, right? Or dark on light colors. Keep that contrast really far apart so that things are really legible. Simple images. Don't use images that have too much going on. Like, get an image that really encapsulates what you're saying in that slide in one very simple, easy image, right? And then as little text as possible. I mean, go look at any Apple presentation. How much text do they ever show on a screen, right? It's very little, only when they really want impact. And whether your live pitch deck is 3 slides, 20 slides, or 50 slides, here's the dirty secret. It doesn't matter, right? What matters is your pacing. If you land on a single slide and you stop and you talk during that slide, you're slowing the pace down. But if you start picking it up and you start, one slide, another slide, but it's connected to what you're saying, all you're doing is increasing the pace so that when you land on, a stopping point, it's going to have more impact. Just like a TV show, when a part's dramatic, it slows down. But when you get to an action scene, it speeds up. The number of cuts speed up. So, that's like asking a director, well, did you have, should you keep your movie to 1,000 cuts or 50,000 cuts? And that's what always drives me nuts with pitch decks. It's, should I have it be 10 pages or 50? Well, okay, there is a difference, right?
Yep.
But if you pack a single page full of text and then, and only have 2 pages, have you really accomplished attention, retention, and absorption and recall? No, because they're reading a book.
And to take it to that next level, and top of that is one of the worst things I see from decks of all kinds, specifically pitch decks as well, is the people who write what they're going to say on the slide.
Yeah, don't read from a slide.
One thing to have like bullet points. Like, obviously you heard Greg talk about larger font sizes and simple images, but he didn't do like, here's my list of things that you should remember, and then just read them and went, yay. He provided context. He didn't elaborate. He didn't say specifically the exact wording of each one. He talked about how they kind of go together a little bit. I think he even might have left one or just kind of briefly flew past one. Why? Because it probably wasn't as important as some of the others, or you'd already referenced it in another explanation. That's probably the biggest thing I see people, or one of the bigger things that I see people doing. I'm sure you can agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to kind of wrap that up, I've been at a lot of companies where, they want to invest in one set of materials.
Yep.
And that's fine. If you need to invest in one set of materials, invest in one set, but then take the time to strip out language, strip out copy, create a live version so that when you go in the room, you have impact, and then you can email everyone in the room or in the Zoom call, the full ones, then they can read at their level and at their timing and their absorption level later, right? So keep it simple, keep it clean. All right, so the next one we're going to talk about is design assets, right? So design assets, you can, where do you get these things, right? Like, most people immediately jump on Google and they do a Google search, right? Sure. That's fine. The only challenge there is you got to make sure you're using high-res images. Like, if you were looking at this slide and this guy in the background was fuzzy or it was pixelated, it doesn't scream professional. It doesn't scream high quality. Now, there's a balance, because you want images that relate to what you're talking about. Sometimes that's hard to find. In our business, when we don't have that for like a TV pitch, for example, we create it. We use Photoshop to comp and combine images together to create that perfect image that tells the story of that slide, right? So there is a trade-off. You know, you want the highest quality you can get, but make sure that that photo is relevant. Now, there's places you can find these. I've thrown a few up here: Pixabay, Pexels, Unsplash. These are free, right? These are ones that you can go on and there's no license. For a little extra, for something like Envato Elements or Storyblocks, you can get more premium, not just pictures, but design elements, icons, even templates. If you can find modern templates that weren't made 8 years ago that are very modern and already have all the slides you need to build a great investment deck. So, these elements are available. Envato Elements is only around $30, $35 a month with no contract. I mean, do it once. Sign up for 1 month, download everything you need, photos, icon packs, like this little icon in the corner here, that a little checklist, like those are icons. Download an entire icon pack and use them instead of bullet points, right? Storyblocks is a great place for images. You pay a little more than you would on a normal, a free site. Obviously, it's more than anything that it's more. But you get better images, and then when those run out, you don't find what you're looking for, then go to Google. Then find those images that just tell your story, and then organize them. Take the time to put them in folders. Don't just throw 100 photos in one folder, because when you want to work and you got to sift through them all, it's going to take way more time than if you just put people in people folders. Just organize them so that they make
also
sense.
marry yourself to like a naming convention, for your files, and make sure it's organized to the nth degree that way as well. Exactly. Good piece of business there, Greg.
Yeah, exactly. So now the next thing, you have your assets. What do you do with them, right? You need to use them, right? So when you're using photos, you can easily just drop a photo in, and that's fine. Put it in a corner, put it in, somewhere. We like to take that extra step and do things like this, where we cut out photos. We blend them, and we do comping. So there's more that you can do, like make sure that the photos, they're color kind of in the right color tone. Some photos just are naturally shot warmer and some are naturally shot cooler. And believe it or not, adjusting that is going to fit better with certain colors you might already have in your deck, right?
Right.
Icons, great use of icons will always help. Just don't overdo it, right? Don't use icons everywhere. This is one of those use them, but don't abuse them type of things. And then simple shapes, just like this deck. I'm using yellow lines, real simple, just underneath titles. If that title was all on its own, would it look good? It would look all right, but it looks a little better with the line. So,
it wouldn't look as good.
Yeah, right. So it's simple shapes and corners, like dotted lines, and, just adding these little simple shapes. Be consistent though. If you use it once, use it again. If you're going to introduce a shape, don't just do it one time randomly. Like, have a purpose to the elements that you use.
Yep.
All right. So, we all love Chrissy. So here's a great quote that I love to kick off the next section of the next section of what we're talking about here. Tweeting from bed is quick and fun, but it also leaves a lot of room for error because new people don't sense the sarcasm. There's no sarcasm font. Now, you see what I did there? I read off the screen. Who else does that occasionally? Steve Jobs used to do that, but only when it mattered, because he really wanted you to get the message. There is no sarcasm font. What do I mean by that? Okay, fonts tell their own story. Fonts are important, okay? And how you use fonts is very important, all right? So the best thing you can do for yourself is pick a font family. What I mean by that is you want to pick a font that has a lot of these weights, sizes, and options. So Roboto is a good example. Roboto here has very light versions that are real thin, all the way up to really big, thick, thick, black, bold ones. That way, you're not trying to figure out how to pair two completely different fonts, which even as a professional designer, sometimes that can be very challenging to fit different fonts together and know that they really go together. If you're not a pro designer, just pick one font family, and then it'll help you immeasurably. And what do I mean by that? When you get into the different kind of fonts, like there's so many options, right? You've got like these real clean modern ones like Babus New, or these sort of wing dingy kind of have these little extra tidbits on them, like Rockwell. So
Right.
all of these tell a little bit of a different story, right? And you, just by looking at them, you get a feeling, right? Futura is got like an Art Deco kind of feel to it,
Yeah.
right? Montserrat is a real popular one for that. It's kind of spread out and blocky, and it just has this really assertive feeling to it. Fonts do relay a message, right? And these are free fonts. So these you can just look up online, download them, add them to your system, and start using them. They don't always come with your system. So sometimes you want to look for fonts outside of your system if you don't want to look and feel like everyone else and look like a PowerPoint from 10 years ago. Changing fonts can completely help you brand what you're doing in a way that you hadn't thought before. Then you got to figure out how to use the fonts, right? So using fonts effectively and using weights and size, etc. Now, when you build a header, a subheader, or copy text, you're giving priority to the reader. You're telling them there's something really important I want you to read first, then second, then third. Okay. So poor font use is when you have like a thick header with a little bit smaller font, but it's still thick.
Yeah.
The problem there is just visually you get this contrasting issue. You get this prioritization issue. Well, it's the subheader.
Yes, it looks more like an error than something you did purposely.
Yeah, and it's kind of just a design rookie mistake. It's something people don't often think about. But when using effective font, sizes and weights, we typically go much thicker on headers, and we typically go much thinner on subheaders. And that's where having a font family that has that variation of really extreme heavy to really extreme thin is important. Just be careful when you go with thin. You don't go so thin that you affect readability. Try reading your deck on a phone. If you can't read it on your phone, then the person on the other end probably can't read it either.
That's right.
All right. So the next section. Cooking is like painting or writing a song. Just as there are only so many notes or colors, there are only so many flavors. It's how you combine them that sets you apart. Here's a dirty secret with a lot of design. We're taking things that already exist in the world, at least with layout design, and we're just combining them in a way that the average person just doesn't know how to do, right? And it doesn't mean you can't learn. It's just that we're following rules and we're using our gut, right? And we're being very critical about what we're doing, right? So that starts out with color palette. That's one of the ingredients that exist. Look, I'm not a color expert. I have a hard time with colors. So I go to other resources to help me. Coolers is a great website where you can take, let's say there's this one color you really like, but you don't know how to create a color family or a color palette out of that. Go to Coolers, upload a snapshot, maybe it's a screenshot or a JPEG of it or whatever you've got, upload it. Coolers will spit out a color palette for you. They already know what colors go well together. What's a pastel? What's a, is your deck full of pastels or is your deck full of neon colors, right? There's a difference. But if you start mixing pastels with neons, you may think it looks really cool, but the person on the other end is going to be like mentally fatigued, right? Color makes a difference. The other option that you can do is if you really have nowhere to start, go to Brand Colors. Brand Colors is a great site where you can look at what colors all the major brands are using with hex codes and everything. There are literally codes for each of these colors. And if you want to take a code from a brand that already exists that's like yours and enter it into PowerPoint or whatever you're designing in, it will spit out that same exact color, right? So you can go to Brand Colors and get inspired. Now you don't want to fully rip off a company, but at the same time, if you're very similar, you feel your ethos is very similar, and everything else about your design is different, but your colors are the same, people are going to kind of they're going to kind of like mentally connect that in some way. It's subliminal, right? A lot of design is subliminal. It's what's happening under the surface, the emotion someone's getting when they're reading a deck or when they're looking at a design. Okay, so now we're talking through proximity. This is kind of an important concept because it's all tied to layout design. Layout design is all about the spacing of everything, right? So
when you open up a magazine, one of my favorites is LA Mag, because they have incredible designers, incredible layout artists. What you notice is that the proximity of everything is so tight. Everything, is so well laid out, right? And you notice it because it's a magazine. That's what makes it look professional, right? But if you took those same words yourself and tried to put it, it'd be really tough to make it look as professional. And the whole thing behind that is that the designers are using principles and rules. And I'm not saying these rules just exist out in fairy tale land. You're actually creating the rules for yourself in a lot of cases.
Yes.
But there's some principles here, right? So proximity effect is and negative space. These are two kind of principles here. We'll start with negative space. Don't feel compelled to fill a slide full of text. This is where we were talking about how many slides should your pitch deck be. You probably shouldn't have too many sections of your deck. Like you shouldn't have 15 different slides that talk about your problem, the solution, right? You want to limit the amount of copy, but that doesn't mean you have to limit the number of slides. If you want somebody to remember something, put it on a slide like this. Don't give them a whole bunch of additional stuff to read. Hit on a point that's important and use the negative space to your advantage. Use it to draw attention. There's only two things on this slide. It's a camera and the text that I wanted you to read. That's the message you're going to walk away with. If I filled this with 4 other bullet points or messages, not to say you're not going to remember them, but that one thing is not going to be remembered as well if it's paired with 4 or 5 other things.
Sure. Actually, Greg, this is probably a good place for us to pause. I know we have a lot more to go, but let's entice our viewers by saying, hey, you'll be able to actually pick up this deck. And there's actually a few more tidbits that Greg will go into, probably in a subsequent broadcast, I would say, but we'll have that available for you. Greg, I really appreciate you sharing.
Absolutely.
Tips.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the time, appreciate the opportunity to come talk to all your people. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Now, before we go anywhere, of course, let's tell everybody they will be able to find this deck. You'll be able to, we'll probably create a downloadable link and we'll put it everywhere that the show is. So you'll be able to get that. So now let's make sure that everybody knows where they can find you in Falkor Digital.
Absolutely. It's pretty simple. It's www.falkordigital.com. Falkor is if that's ringing a bell, it is the character from Neverending Story.
It is.
Falkor was that dog dragon character, right? And that's like us. We're calm, cool. We swoop in. We save the day. So it's
there you go.
K-O-R, F-A-L-K-O-R, digital.com. So that's pretty easy to find.
Excellent. And yeah, of course, then you guys have some social profiles too, so feel free to check those out as well. And of course, you can find them on the services index at Wrazel.com as well. Greg, like I said, that deck is going to be available for everybody who's listening. Please hit up Greg and Falkor if you have any design needs. As you can see, very, very much an expert in the area. We love using him, and so we would imagine that you would too. Greg, you have a great day. Look forward to talking to you again very soon, sir.
You as well. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Of course. Anytime. Take care.
All right.